The statement from Jens Stoltenberg, NATO is not seeking war with Russia, no to a no-fly zone, no planes, no troops on the ground. Does that surprise you at all at this point?
No, it's not a change in position for NATO whatsoever. What was extraordinary coming out of that meeting this morning was the fact that, and it was slipped in near the end of Jens Stoltenberg's comments, he talked about there's going to be enhanced cooperation, enhanced sharing of information with Sweden and Finland. Both of those countries are not NATO members. And there has been, over the decades, flirting with NATO, but those countries have, because of their proximity to Russia, have decided not to seek NATO membership. There's been a great deal of speculation among NATO countries as to whether or not the conflict in Ukraine will drive both Sweden and Finland to seek NATO membership. And the enhanced cooperation, the enhanced sharing is one very tantalizing look at the relationship between those two countries and NATO.
The other countries he mentioned, Murray, Georgia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, saying that they are going to bolster support in those countries at all, like Ukraine, seeking closer ties with the NATO alliance, seeking membership there, in fact. Does that indicate, I mean, he was asked directly if there have been any particular threats of Russian aggression, Russian moves further into those countries. But again, they're obviously aware that this could expand beyond Ukraine.
Well, that's true. And you also saw today Moldova as an example, which is a country bordering Ukraine, has asked for EU membership. The events of the last week or so have rattled countries in Eastern Europe. They don't feel secure anymore, and they're looking for some kind of protection, either be it through alliances with or informal relationships with NATO, or even perhaps going a step further and joining the EU. So it is definitely shaking the international order.
The events of the past week, how about the events of the past 12 hours, 24 hours with the direct attack on a nuclear power plant? I'm wondering, certainly that was the backdrop to some of the questions and probably to some of the debate around that conference table, Murray. But how do you think, seeing what seems to be a deliberate target, a nuclear power plant and all of that could entail, how might that then change the military calculus?
Well, I can tell you that speaking with several people in the defense and security community over the attack on the nuclear power plant, they were sucking in their teeth yesterday because there is the potential and continues to be the potential for some kind of nuclear accident. Some of the reactors at that facility are shut down. However, two of them are still operating. And as the manager of the plant said this morning, that the Ukrainian nuclear workers are continuing their jobs at gunpoint. So it is still a very tenuous situation. And what it underlines is the importance of the negotiations that were taking place between Ukraine and Russia to effect some kind of ceasefire. I think that from both a military and a political standpoint, what you're going to end up seeing is increased pressure because of this attack on the nuclear facility to get some kind of at least ceasefire negotiation in place, some kind of protections and safeguards, because an accident there would be extraordinarily catastrophic. That goes without saying. What the Russians were doing in trying to capture that nuclear facility was because it provides a great deal of power for Ukraine's power grid, and they have the switch now. They're able to turn on and turn off and perhaps interrupt power supplies in a manner that could aid their military campaign.
We heard that from our guest. From a military strategic standpoint, it is a reasonable target. It makes sense from that viewpoint, as you just said, to be able to control the power. And yet, the potential consequences are just absolutely chilling to contemplate. Murray, I want to ask you about something, too. I was struck in the briefing for Jens Stoltenberg. The question that came from a Ukrainian journalist, again, even with the backdrop of the attack on the power plant, not going to the no-fly zone route. And she was saying to him how the people of Ukraine really are begging for NATO to do this. And how will it look if they know of the potential consequences and they're not going to review their position and not going to move in that way? Is there anything yet to do to help turn the tide more?
Well,
do we, short of going into the country?
Well, at the moment, I mean, their strategy has been to continue to arm Ukraine and help in any way necessary, short of direct military involvement, be it through troops on the ground or through the enforcement of a no-fly zone. Given the horrific images of destruction and death that we are seeing, given all of the suffering that we're able to see take place within Ukraine, there is going to be enormous political pressure on NATO to change its position. But I think what they're struggling with right now, Heather, is what else can they do militarily that is able to thread a needle where they're not going to come in direct confrontation with Russia. Part of the reason that they don't want to enforce the no-fly zone or create a no-fly zone, et cetera, is because of the fact that they have made the decision that they really don't know what Vladimir Putin will do. All of the predictions of all of the officials, all of the way down the line, has been that Putin was not going to invade Ukraine. He has done completely the opposite at every turn. And so one of the arguments that I heard this morning was very interesting in the sense that if they were dealing with a rational actor, then there may be some military action, that would not lead to an escalation that they could take. But it's the unpredictability that is partly at the root of what NATO is, NATO's hesitation. But they're going to have to do something. There's no two ways about it. And what the solution is, I honestly don't know.
That question, the reckless actions, as Stoltenberg described them, what exactly is he thinking and what is driving him? Some of the reason for, it's interesting to bring that forward, some of the reason behind the hesitancy. Can I ask you, just before I let you go this time, Murray, where does all of this leave Canada?
Well, at the moment, Canada is reinforcing its eastern flank, the eastern flank of NATO. It is preparing 460 reinforcements in the form of a frigate, an artillery battery, and an electronic warfare squadron. Those are the first immediate reinforcements that the government is trying to get out the door. It has also sent more lethal aid to Ukraine, and of course, they have been on a daily basis ratcheting up the sanctions. What we're going to be looking at, and I think what we need to pay close attention to going forward, is the 3,400 troops that are being promised to NATO's response force. There are questions about not whether or not Canada can generate those number of troops. I think that's pretty clear that within a military, 68,000 regular force and 30,000 reserve force, Canada can generate it. The question is, can it sustain it? And what sort of equipment is there? What shape is it in? For example, Canada's CF-18s would not be able to go up against Russian air defense systems. The Army, it does not have its own air defense system. Will the government step forward and while it's buying weapons and munitions and equipment for Ukraine, will it equip and make some urgent purchases for the Canadian military to ensure that Canadian troops, if they have to deploy into Eastern Europe, are safe? I think those are some of the things we're going to have to be watching for going forward. And
I know you'll be reporting on it. It's some really excellent pieces at CBCNews.ca for people who want to read more in depth. You smile when you say that because I know you think Canadians would be probably astounded to know that the Army doesn't have that kind of defense mechanism, correct? Surprising.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, Heather, I wrote about it in 2019, and people don't necessarily seem to pay attention. And I'm not saying that the public necessarily. It's not a top political priority.
Right.
There are many other things.
But
the best way, but the best way to describe it is that, like, the military is often an insurance policy, and keeping the equipment and the personnel ready to go for a crisis like this is what the military is supposed to be all about.
it is certainly a priority now for the world as we look at